Well, our first guest tonight said this about her uncle. He is quite simply a loser. Mary Trump knows more about Donald Trump than any of us ever will. And Mary Trump is sure that what you are about to hear Letitia James, the Attorney General Letitia James, say after winning a $500 million civil fraud judgment against Donald Trump will push him closer to the edge.
If he does not have funds to pay off the judgment, then we will seek, judgment enforcement mechanisms in court, and we will ask the judge to seize his assets. We are prepared to make sure that the judgment is paid to New Yorkers. And yes, I look at 40 Wall Street each and every day.
Mary Trump writes, knowing Donald as I do, here's why I know this statement will push him closer to the edge. First, James implies that there's a possibility Donald does not have enough cash to satisfy the judgment. That alone is enough to enrage him. James took it a step further. We are prepared to make sure that the judgment is paid to New Yorkers. And yes, I look at 40 Wall Street each and every day, James said, referring to the Trump building in Manhattan. 40 Wall Street is the building that Donald Trump proudly proclaimed on 9/11 suddenly became the tallest building in Lower Manhattan immediately after the World Trade Center towers collapsed after a terrorist attack.
40 Wall Street actually was the second tallest building in downtown Manhattan, and it was actually, before the World Trade Center, was the tallest. And then when they built the World Trade Center, it became known as the second tallest, and now it's the tallest.
That's what was actually happening. What was on the screen was what was actually happening while Donald Trump was saying that. The World Trade Center was burning. It was on its way to collapse. And all Donald Trump cared about when he was far away from that danger zone, the only thing that he could think about was the size of his building in Lower Manhattan. He wasn't even slightly worried that he might have lost a friend in the rubble at the World Trade Center. In fact, he didn't know anyone who died that day and never went to a single 9/11 funeral, although years later he lied about that and said that he, quote, lost hundreds of friends on 9/11, end quote. That was a complete lie. He lost no friends on 9/11. But he now could lose 40 Wall Street if that is what it takes to pay the judgment against him. Donald Trump's cognitive decline continues in plain view.
We're going to take over Washington, D.C. We're going to federalize. We're going to have very powerful crime, and you're going to be proud of it again.
We're going to have very powerful crime, and you're going to be proud of it. Now imagine how many headlines there would be about that story if Joe Biden had said those exact words. Donald Trump gets to say, we're going to have very powerful crime, and you're going to be proud of it. And no one in the news media even notices. In Donald Trump's declining mind, he probably thought he was saying something, but the words that came out were idiotic. And that happens all the time.
They come out with faucets where no water comes out. You know, if you go and buy a home, and they know what I mean, the showers, you stand under a shower and
said that. And think about what Donald Trump just said. Donald Trump thinks that if a shower produces no water, you actually have to stand there 5 times longer. Think about that. Think about how that mind works. How long would you stay in your shower if no water was coming out? Wouldn't you get out of there a lot faster if no water is coming out? If someone told you that no water was coming out of their shower, would you then assume that they stay in the shower 5 times longer? That's how Donald Trump's mind works in cognitive decline. Donald Trump said, and apparently believes, because of his cognitive decline, quote, they come out with faucets where no water comes out. We will get Mary Trump's assessment of Donald Trump's cognitive decline in a moment. But for those of you who might not have heard Donald Trump speak 25 years ago, when he was 52 years old, I found an amazing example of how Donald Trump spoke then in the brilliant Rick Burns, brother of Ken Burns, documentary series about New York City, produced in 1999. Imagine my amazement watching an episode of that documentary, which tells the story of New York City from the arrival of the Dutch to the present day, using the insights of brilliant historians and New Yorkers and New York legends like Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who was an authoritative historian of New York in his own right. A series of distinguished, wise voices. And then to suddenly hear a voice begin off screen and sound strangely familiar, but it couldn't be that voice, could it?
The reason the great skyscrapers went up in Manhattan is that Manhattan is an island of very powerful bedrock. It's granite and basically very, very high-density rock that, frankly, digging foundations is unbelievably difficult. You have to blast to build in Manhattan. And the buildings went up in Manhattan because of the power of that bedrock. Once you dig that foundation, and when they dig, they really dig. They dig with dynamite. And once you dynamite out and you secure that foundation, that building isn't going anywhere.
Every word of that is true. Who is that guy? That is not the same mind you're listening to today. Donald Trump went from saying that accurate and informative statement about building in New York City 25 years ago to now saying they come out with faucets where no water comes out. The showers, you stand under a shower and there is no water coming out. And you say you end up standing there 5 times longer. What happened to that mind over the last 25 years? And what is happening to that mind tonight? As Attorney General of New York, Letitia James, closes in on Donald Trump's assets.